Some directors are attached to one location, or at least one type of location, and you, on the other hand, you keep on changing. You've done Los Angeles in Tangerine, Florida motels in Florida Project, a small Texas town in Red Rocket, and now New York in Anora. Will you be doing all 50 states in the end? Or?
That would be fun. Definitely fun. I'm not sure, because it's usually a location that is connected also to a unique community or subculture. So those two have to go hand in hand, and the location has to be photogenic. I've come across, these locations that inspire me to photograph them in a certain way.
It seems that in any location you film, it's always a matter of different worlds colliding, even visually, geographically. It's often poverty, but with wealth in the background, or wealth coming by in a car.
Interesting.
Worlds colliding.
Yeah, well, I love collision, especially just on a human level. Just people sometimes having an aggressive interaction, for me, can be interesting because, it can be funny. It can be funny. I recognize myself sometimes in confrontations and it's just, I'm just exploring human interactions. I think that I find fascinating on many levels. Yeah.
To you, is it something that tells how America is today? Words colliding aggressively?
Well, yeah, it doesn't always have to be aggressively. I think when I'm telling these stories, it's usually with characters that, an ensemble cast, so therefore an ensemble group of characters coming together, and there's usually some drama attached to it, so that's what makes it, aggressive. But I think it's also that, the U.S. is a melting pot. And so in any of these locations, you're going to find people of different backgrounds, cultures, and ideologies coming together. And especially in New York City. I mean, especially New York, it is considered the great melting pot. So shooting in Anora in Brighton Beach and Coney Island was very interesting. It has this very rich and very, when I say rich, I mean like historically rich and very colorful Russian American community. But they're living amongst many other nationalities, races, and cultures, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see how it plays out.
You've said in an interview once that you wanted to tell, I quote, U.S. stories.
I did? Ooh, okay.
I'm afraid you did. I have proof, I have footage.
Oh, no.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
I don't know if that's the truth anymore. I think there were some, at the time, maybe I said that during like Florida Project, there were some major issues that I wanted to confront at the time, the hidden homelessness in the United States. But no, I'm starting to see things more globally, and I'm starting to approach things that might be issue based, with less of a political, like a tackling of the actual subject, and more about themes. So I could tell stories that take place outside the United States. I was actually already considering a film that took place in Canada, which I know is just next door, but it is a different country. And the reason I would tell that story is because there's something unique happening there that isn't in the United States. So hopefully I can look outside the States. But there's so many stories to be told in the States at the same time. And I am from there, so it is obviously easier for me, and I think most honest for me to be telling those stories. Yeah.
Looking at your films from Europe, the word that comes to mind is, it's silly, but American. Very much an American cinema.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm filling a void there, or at least if that's working, and it's actually, and people are looking to me to tell these stories, and it's a positive thing, then yeah, why not continue? Why not continue? I need to explore my own country. It's a big country, I've explored a lot of the coastal areas, and it would be nice to get inside. Yeah. And
do all parts of that country interest you? And do you feel you would be welcomed anywhere in that country?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every time I go to a place that I think, is this place going to be hostile or maybe even dangerous. No, it's always, there are always people who are interested in telling their stories, and they're actually, and I find people to be very loving and very open and warm to inviting people in who are willing to listen to their stories. So I haven't found anywhere in the U.S. that has been, aggressive towards me or unwelcome, yeah.
I wanted to ask you a very naive question. I hope that's okay. But looking at your different films, something obviously strikes out. It's that there's always a message about sex workers. Some of your characters are prostitutes, some are pornographic actors, some are strippers. So the naive question is there a reason for that? Was there a trigger for that?
I think the trigger was actually the first film that I did of tackling the subject matter, which was Starlet. So I've made 5 films now that have sex work somewhere in them, whether it's the focus or a subplot. And honestly, it's because making Starlet and then making Tangerine, I just was exposed to that world. I was exposed, and I got to meet sex workers and hear their stories and realize that everybody is an individual. There can't just be one film that is supposed to represent an entire, livelihood or profession or a group of people. So I could just keep going on and on and on. There are a million stories to be told in that world. I never wanted to become a shtick. I never wanted it to seem like, oh, this is my thing. This is all I can do, and now I'm using this because I've had one successful one. I'm going to keep doing it. No. It's because it's actually happened quite organically. I didn't even know that Anora was going to be a sex worker film. It kind of came after the fact. I knew I was telling a film about the Russian American community first and foremost, and then it happened to be that sex work worked its way in. So it's on a film-by-film basis. I don't know whether it's going to be involved in the next movie. And if it is, it'll be a completely different take on it, or a different, a different group of people who are involved with sex work. And, you asked me why. I think it's because it's supposedly our oldest profession, and yet the very strong and unfair stigma that is applied to it by our society has never gone away. It's still there. It's still just as strong, and sex workers are still marginalized and alienated unfairly in my eyes. So if anything, these are films that I think just help chip away. These are stories that help chip away at the stigma by presenting, fully fleshed out, humanized characters that hopefully audiences can have empathy with,
More generally, your characters are always people who are rarely movie heroes. You show bodies that are rarely shown in cinema, or at least not in such an honest and yet tender way. There are black trans women, there are damaged bodies. Do you feel like cinema forgets people, some types of people, and you have to put light on them?
I do, and it's because of this the business side of it. The business, who's running the business, who's telling the stories. Everybody can be a movie star, right? Everybody deserves to be a movie star. I mean, meaning that, like, these characters deserve stories told by just like everybody else is. So I think that my films are, in a way, I think a reaction of what I'm not seeing enough of. I never saw 2 black trans sex workers as the leads of a film before, and I said, well, isn't it about time? Why not? Yeah.
Do you sometimes feel like you're on a mission?
I am on a mission to make good feature films, okay? I am on a mission to continue to make feature films. That's my art, and in many ways also that's my livelihood. And I'm a cinephile, and I love movies. So that's definitely the goal. But if you're asking me about the type of stories I'm telling, or a political mission in any way, I see it as of course, my ideology and my politics will always be embedded. It's impossible for them not to be, but I never want it to seem like a mission. I never want it to seem like I'm preaching, because as soon as you preach, you're talking to only one side of the crowd, right? And I think the whole goal of storytelling and cinema and art in general is to bring people together and to spark discussion. So I never feel it's like a mission to spread my ideology. Instead, it's like just, sharing thoughts and then hopefully sparking discussion.
Yeah, you're talking about side of the rooms, and I was precisely wondering, when you make a movie, do you have a specific audience in mind, or maybe different audiences that you want to bring back together? And
there is a sensibility. Like, obviously not everyone's going to love my type of films. They're crass, they can be, audacious and obnoxious and loud and chaotic, and so it's for people who like that sort of thing, obviously. But I want it to be for everybody. I want it to be for general audiences, and it's been very encouraging to see audiences react to this film, because I wasn't exactly sure. I thought that it was going to be more divisive, and seeing it play at Cannes and then following it at Telluride, which is a major U.S. film festival, and then Toronto, the audiences have been very engaged and laughing, and you can tell that there's an energy going on with the audience, and that was our intention, was to make a film that actually should be seen better if it's seen with a crowd. And so no, I just want general audiences to be able to go in and have fun.
I've heard you talk about the movies you like in interviews, and there is a word that you use a lot to describe your favorite movies.
Okay.
It's visceral.
Oh.
And I wanted to come back to the very first sense of that word. I was wondering if, to you, movies are meant to be actually felt in the gut while making them or watching them.
Oh, most definitely. People are spending their hard-earned money and their time. So make an impact, right? You don't want somebody to just passively watch your film and then moments later forget they even watched it, or half watch it on their phone while they're checking email. No, you want engagement, and then it's your responsibility as the filmmaker to deliver something that keeps the engagement, and hopefully even keeps it after they leave the theater. That's the best thing, when somebody's actually going home and talking about the movie or thinking about it, then you've made an impact. So of course, yeah.
And making an impact, does that mean disturbing the audience a little bit too?
It can be. I mean, there's a skill there. And if that's the goal and the filmmaker ends up, disturbing an audience, traumatizing an audience or whatever, and the filmmaker has accomplished that, then I commend the filmmaker for that.
Nowadays, we talk a lot about filming with a male gaze or a female gaze.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that distinction, especially with you being such an exception to it, because you're a male filmmaker who is praised for how well you tell women's stories and how well you film women. Yeah,
it is an interesting thing, because we're so aware of it now. We talk about it. We're very sensitive to it. We've gone through stages in which certain gaze, especially the male gaze, has been criticized because of the fact that it's the primary gaze for so long, being that male filmmakers have dominated the industry, and that's sad. But at the same time, there is an honesty that comes from the gaze. It's one person's vision. So I have had to, with each film, balance being aware of my own personal gaze, and then trying to see, is it appropriate to bring it in right now? Should I suppress it more? Should I increase it? It really depends on the film. I made a film called Starlet, which was the film that kind of started me off with the sex work subject matter. And I tried my best to actually be to remove the male gaze and to be and to be quite clinical in my approach to it. So I would have just as much male nudity as I would have female nudity, and I would show things in a very non-erotic way, purposely to approach it in an objective way. I did the same thing, I think, with Tangerine, with Florida Project, and then there was something in Red Rocket because it was a male protagonist, and it was and the way he saw the world, and we were spending so much time with him that something told me that it was okay. It was okay if I applied some male gaze to certain scenes, not to offend, hopefully, or not to but to be honest. And if people were upset with me for that, okay, sorry, but I'm trying to be honest. And then this film, the new film with Anora, the question was also about, okay, when should we not have that male gaze present? And so it was actually came from my working relationship with Mikey, because we did want to show sex work in the most realistic way possible, but also a very subjective way, and that's why most of the sex scenes are just very, very short, but just show you this is what it's like. This is what is involved with her day-to-day work activity. Okay, so those were just boom, 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 these images. But then at the same time, there was Mikey actually co-created the dance that she did. There was a scene in the movie where she has a date at this client's house, and she goes over, and the date begins with a dance on the floor, an erotic, dance in which she is stripping, and she works her way across the floor to him who's on the couch. And in the script, it was just like, Annie dances erotically for Yvonne, period. End of scene. It had no details, because I didn't know what it would look like. I thought it was going to be very brief. And then Mikey actually went and created this dance with her dance instructor. And she showed us it. She recorded it and showed us it. And I saw, oh my God, this is extensive. This is quite impressive. And I can actually use this to show the audience how good she is at her line of work. And how do I do that? Maybe I should make a moment of this scene. Maybe I should actually shoot it almost like a music video. And just by shooting it like a music video with the music and the sun flaring and the camera moves, it does become male gaze at that point. But that male gaze is completely intentional, because it is Yvonne's gaze, and therefore it is the gaze of a client. We are seeing her right there the way that her clients see her. And I think that that's important, to put the audience in the head of the clients to see, this is why she's so good at her. This is why she's a professional. This is why she's so good at her work.
It reminds me of something you said about the movie industry that I thought to be so interesting. You said that to you it was okay to have mainstream movies that are obviously on the side of virtue and progress, to have like Marvel movies with non-white characters and queer stories that end well and happy endings. And that on the other hand, independent cinema had to tackle nuance and politically incorrect, and you say honesty, which involves perhaps some flaws and some not being always perfect.
100%. When did I say that? You remember that? Yeah, and I still agree with that. I really do. Because, when you're telling these sort of stories that are supposed to be grounded in reality, and you're supposed to have an audience, empathize with perhaps a character they never thought they could empathize with, you can't sanctify them. You can't make them perfect, because we're not perfect, And when you see a character that's perfect, you're like, that's not me. There's no way you can connect or identify. So you have to show somebody in their real self, their full self, flaws and all. And I think that's also endearing. When you see somebody who is not perfect, it's in a way comforting, because it's like, okay, we all have our issues, we all have our problems, we all are struggling, we all make mistakes, but it's okay. It's what makes us human. And so I apply that to all my characters, and I think that it's the way that I keep these films honest and real.
I wanted to ask you something about Samantha Kwan, who is co-producer of your movies and who is also your wife. I hope you don't mind me mentioning that.
No, not at all.
You gave her beautiful tributes in your speeches at Cannes, for instance. And I found that very inspiring. You said how she plays an essential part in your movies.
Yes.
And I was wondering if both as your wife and producer, you feel she contributes to educating you on how to film women and tell women's stories?
Oh, most definitely. To have, a female point of view and voice is vital and helps me be more objective with my work. And let's just say she's incredibly talented on many levels. And working with her has only made my films better. Each film has gotten better as she's gotten more involved. And it's a really wonderful working relationship.
I was wondering what your relationship is to the news. Does it impact your creativity in any way? Do you draw inspiration from it, or do you shield yourself from it?
No, I do. I the way I watch and listen to the news is that I listen to both sides, even the most extreme of both sides, because that's the only way to figure out really what's truly happening. And that's how I absorb the news. We're living in very tumultuous times, and it's sometimes hard to handle the news on a daily basis. But I think you can see how I apply current events into my films and the way that we react to current events. I mean, you can especially see that with Red Rocket. Red Rocket was all about how our news has somehow become reality shows, Even look at our election. It's come down to like a crazy reality show. And now and that's how it's watched by the public, rooting for one side or the other in a quiz show type of way. So, I think I have applied it that way.
And will the outcome of this election have direct consequences on your work?
I don't see how it can't. I mean, this is such a major election, probably the election of our lifetime. So I don't know how that'll play out. I really don't. But I am positive it'll work its way into our art somehow. Yeah.
Depending on who wins, will it be harder for you to make movies or more necessary?
It definitely will become either harder or easier, but different aspects. It's a complicated issue. And again, as I said earlier, my politics are in my films subversively, and you can try to analyze, you can try to interpret them. I never want to preach, though, because I want my stories to be talked about on both sides of the aisle and hopefully used to bring both sides of the aisle together.
About the state of cinema. On the one hand, you're very vocal about movie theaters closing down and how young people watch movies at home rather than in theaters, and that
it's not just young people. It's not just young people. But yeah.
And that worries you a lot, and you're very vocal about that. But on the same time, you said that to you there was a rising film culture today.
Yeah, I see a little bit rising, and of course, in the cities. There hasn't been one in LA for a while, and I'm starting to see a little bit, a community start to blossom. But at the same time, exhibition is a major, major issue. And I think people are sort of giving in, which is sad. Even if there is a film culture, it's like, oh yeah, what's streaming this week? So people who are still interested in cinema, but I think there's a lot broken in the system. And I think that audiences have forgotten, I really do, whether they love film or not, I think they have forgotten that there is a magic that comes from watching a film in a theater, not only on the big screen with good sound, but with other audience members experiencing the same thing at the same time. There's an energy that happens there. If you want to keep these movie theaters alive, you have to support them. You really have to support them. Whether you're an audience member by saying, okay, I'm going to support this independently owned theater, instead of buying the VOD that weekend, do it. If you're a filmmaker, you say, I want my film to be seen in theaters, and tell your distributor that. It makes it more special. It actually elevates the importance of a film. I think we've forgotten that. And all these streamers that are making these films, sure, they are number one for one day, and then they get lost forever amongst thousands of other movies on some platform. So it takes everybody. It takes everybody, from the audience to the filmmakers to the studios to the distributors, to really change their way of thinking and fight for what we want. Yeah.
In that state of things, an institution like the Cannes Festival is a bit of a strange thing. Is it naive to have a place that keeps on pretending like cinema is stronger than ever and the most important thing, or is it necessary to have such a place?
It's not naive at all. Anything that like celebrates cinema, I think, is very important, and so no, not in any way do I feel it's naive. I think they're what's keeping this art form alive.
You have great admiration for the very craft of cinema, of how old movies were made, both visually and narratively. And on the other hand, it feels like you want to make movies like no one else makes them, and to do unconventional things all the time.
That's what makes any art form interesting, is evolution and bringing something new to the screen. And when we talk about classics, why are they classics? They're good, but it's often that they were the first time they did something. You know, this is the first time we saw this. This is the first time. Citizen Kane, you know, all of the technique, all the craft that he brought, this was the first time anybody was seeing that. He invented that language. And I think that if we can just keep trying to invent new, new dialects or whatever in that language, I think that's exciting. And that can go on forever.
Is realism the most important thing for you when you make a movie?
I think it's for these types of stories, these human stories, character studies, or stories in which I want the audience to really connect with the character. Yes, there has to be, at some point in there has to be, we have to be brought down to reality. There has to be, grounded realism. But it's not the most important thing. I mean, I've been very moved and swept away by the most fantastical, otherworldly stories that are told. I think the most important thing is quite honestly just entertaining an audience. This is an entertainment medium. That's how it began. You can use this medium to get your ideology across, or to make a point, or to shine a light on something, or to whatever. But ultimately, you have to remember that people are spending their hard-earned money. They're taking 2 to 3 hours out of their night to be entertained and to escape. And I think that's ultimately the most important thing, to take an audience on an entertaining journey.
Thank you very much for your time and your patience.
Thank you.